Welcome everybody. I'm so delighted to be chatting today with Miss Latia Gary, who is just an amazing woman that I have the pleasure of knowing. And we're going to talk today about self-confidence and how you build it, particularly hopefully hoping to get some insights from her about her journey in building her company and how that played a role in how she's built her self-confidence and her ability to advocate for herself. So I will let her introduce herself real quick and then we'll dive in.
All right, so hi everyone. I am Latia Gary at Ainsley Stated. Um, to introduce myself, I would say that I am a sister, friend, an advocate, mentor, and a business owner. I started LG Solutions originally in 2013 as my retirement plan, and life kind of happened, and I said, why wait? And I went full-fledged in December of 2021, where we basically work with manufacturers and heavy manufacturing, automotive, nuclear energy sectors, and meeting their contract requirements. And we do that in various ways, including first starting off what the requirements are, how they're meeting them, if they're meeting them, and if they're not, let's figure out how to get them back on track. So in the short, that's a little bit about me. But like I said, first, I am a sister, a friend, an advocate, and a mentor.
I love that. I feel like you've always been so inspiring to me just because you're so confident about like who you are and your identity, and I think that definitely shows. Um, and yeah, so that that ties in perfectly with my first question, which is just what does self-advocacy mean to you? Because I feel like we throw around this term a lot, but each person identifies it with it differently. So what exactly do you think of and what sort of experiences come to mind when you think of self-advocacy?
So for me, self-advocacy, it's a learned skill to me because I think as a woman, or even personally, sometimes I put others' feelings before my own, or I'm such a doer and just trying to do and perform that I may not take the time to actually say what's actually best for me, right? What's in my best interest. There's been times when I've had workloads that may have been necessary for 3 or 4 people, but I was managing it all. And I was
Mhm.
fine with it. And it took someone from the outside to say, no, we got to take some of that off your plate. That's crazy, right? But I was able to manage it. So I was okay. So that's why I say it's a learned skill, in my opinion, um, of how to self advocate and know when enough is enough for you. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, doesn't mean it's in your best interest for your physical, mental, and emotional. Because sometimes, even myself, I like working under pressure. Unfortunately, when I say I like it, it means I
Me
perform
too.
better. If I'm not under pressure, I'm lacking. I'm just lacking. So I need pressure to produce. That's not always the best. Um, so with self-advocacy, I think it's a learned skill that we have to have, and we have to learn how to advocate for ourselves. How to say, number one, I'm good at such and such. I'm the best at such and such. That's also part of self-advocacy, right? Or to know what you need and what you want and have the confidence to actually say it and say it in a way that others around you know that you mean it, right? Um,
Mhm.
so I've had to learn to advocate for myself in both my personal and in my work life.
Well, I love that you touched upon sort of two pieces of self-advocacy because I feel like a lot of times we think self-advocacy is just about fighting for what you want. And it's also about recognizing when enough is enough, as you said. Advocating does not always mean getting more, trying to do more, trying to achieve more. It can also be just taking a step back and recognizing that the situation that you're in is getting too much to handle. And
Mhm.
I feel like as ambitious, um, aspirational women, we both sort of have that happen quite a lot. Where, because like when you were mentioning, you work well under pressure. I also work well under pressure, and so because of that, sometimes the pressure is having too much on my plate to the point where I'm just like I'm churning out stuff, being as efficient as possible, but that's not a good way to live. And I agree that sometimes a huge part of knowing yourself is knowing your limitations as well as your strengths.
Yeah, yeah. And that goes, self-advocacy can go along with self-care,
Mm,
right? And just like I said before, if you're not mentally, physically, and emotionally at your best, or not in the best place, how can you really perform to that ultimate level that you desire to?
exactly. I feel like one of the things though is that sometimes it's hard to tell whether you are not in that kind of environment that you should be. Like either you are just too swamped with work to the point where you can't see a way out, or maybe you just don't recognize that you're in a toxic environment. So, do you have any suggestions for how to identify that?
Hmm. When you're in a when you may be in a toxic environment.
Hmm.
Well, that takes some moment to just stop whatever it is you're doing, and just alone time to breathe and reflect on that particular situation. Is this what I really want?
Hmm.
And I think that takes strength too, because sometimes it can be difficult to recognize you're in a toxic environment, or you're in an environment that you shouldn't, or a relationship that you shouldn't be in.
Hmm.
Um, but that's when that self-advocacy, you have to think about. I once heard a very good friend say to me, nobody's going to treat Tia better than Tia. And I had to think about that and say, you know what? You're absolutely correct.
Hmm.
It's okay, because no one's really going to protect my heart and my well-being better than me. And that also can stem from self-love,
Hmm.
right? Loving yourself and recognizing your own value, so that when you can say you're in a situation that you want, because sometimes we want things, but that doesn't mean it's good for us. To say, this is, yeah, to say this is a want, but overall it doesn't benefit me, or overall it doesn't bring my heart the joy that I want it to, right? And so that's when you have to say, okay, well, how can I make a change? How can
Hmm.
I, um, and the safe, best way.
Yeah, I I think your point about uh, your aspirations not always being the best thing for you is really interesting because um I feel like a lot of times there is this sort of pressure, like if you follow a certain path, if you achieve enough success, you'll finally be satisfied, you'll finally be happy. But maybe getting the highest position possible in a company is not the best thing for you because it will limit your ability to have the impact that you really want to have in the world. I remember somebody I was speaking to once mentioned that she was in a place of like very high importance in a company, but she just missed being the
Mm-hmm.
one person, the boots on the ground, getting her hands dirty, doing the actual like um the not so much the administrative side, but just the hard work and the hands-on part of the job that she loved. So she left that position and took a lower job, but one that made her feel like she was actually contributing to the world. And I guess making that decision really does come with an understanding of what your aspirations are and like who you truly want to be and what you truly value and not what the world is sort of pressuring you to think.
Yeah, so she wanted that satisfaction of performing, that satisfaction of making a difference. Whereas the
Hmm.
position she had, um, she was missing that. She wasn't getting that satisfaction that she wanted. And sometimes, to be quite honest, I've been with companies where the title doesn't necessarily equate to the pay.
Mm,
And so
interesting.
that's something else to consider. Because for some of us, like myself and the young lady you spoke of, we may be more drawn to impact. What difference am I making? Some people are drawn to being a decision maker or having a title, right? So those are different wants that you have to consider. I was once asked to take a leadership role or consider a leadership role, but I saw it as a headache. I saw it as a headache because I already knew that my pay wouldn't change that much, but my hours increased tremendously. And yeah, my hours would increase tremendously. Um, and again, to the point of impact would not be the same. I would be more dependent on others who I didn't hire, right?
Mm,
So sometimes when you have others that you don't hire, they may not perform the way you want or need them to perform. So therefore you have to develop them. So that's a whole nother um, activity level of involvement that you're not going to get paid for, but you would have to do it to get the performance to the level that you want. And so at that point in time, I didn't view it as a good opportunity for me because I would take on more stress and pressures, but less pay and less impact.
gotcha. There are two things that I'm getting from what you're saying, and both I think are really powerful pieces of like knowledge. One of which is it's not the position necessarily that makes your career meaningful. Like just because you are CEO of something does not necessarily like it doesn't automatically mean that you're going to have a greater impact in the way that you want. Like it's really about taking the opportunities that you're given and making the most of them with the time that you have and the goals that you have and the values that you have, not necessarily striving to get to the very, very top because that's when you'll finally have the most impact. I think that's something really powerful that all women should know and recognize because I feel like we're in a society where there is this sort of this what's the word not illusion necessarily but just um assumption or pressure that you have to be beyond a certain level. You have to be at the very, very top or else nobody cares about who you are. And it's frustrating, especially because there are so many ways to make a difference. It's just you do not have to be at that very top in order to make an impact. It's really just about again having that tenacity, having that motivation, having um that drive and putting in the effort.
Right.
And I wish more women were not falling into that trap of feeling like, oh, just because I'm a lower position, that means I can't speak up, I can't do anything about it because I don't have the power here. Because I have a quote, I have a sticker on my laptop that says you always have a choice. And I think that's
Yeah.
really powerful that women should know that because you always have a choice. You always have the chance to do something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the position that gives you that. The position just makes it easier for other people to see it. It just sort of
Mm-hmm.
here's a little bit of the obstacles, but you still have to put in that effort and give that tap into that motivation. Um, and so if you have that effort, if you have the motivation, what's stopping you from doing what you care about?
Absolutely. And making the impact that you want to make. Because again, if you're not happy, if you're not satisfied in your role, if you're not pleased in what you're doing and feel as though you're adding value, then what outward reflection are you giving off to others
That's a good point. Yeah.
if you're not satisfied internally? So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes having those higher levels come with extra pressures, but if they don't satisfy you, then what does your work-life balance work, yes, work life, family time balance look like, right? And are you
Exactly.
able to show up your best for them, much less your employees, much less
Exactly.
your customers and those that you interact with? Um,
Hmm.
so you have to make tough decisions at times, but be willing to make those decisions, right? To get you to your next level and what's a good fit for you. CEO in in company X may not equate to the same thing in company Y. But take the time to figure that out before you make your decision.
And sort of going off that vein, I'm particularly hoping to get your thoughts on your identity as a woman because that adds a whole nother component, I feel like, to understanding what you want out of situation because there are so many additional and distinct challenges that come to being a woman, especially in a male dominant field such as a STEM field or an analytical type field. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on how do you think and how you think your identity as a woman has played a role in your career, in your any challenges that you may have faced, and um, just how have you navigated that additional piece of your identity as you've built your successful entrepreneurial career?
So I would say that for some reason, people like to switch my first and my last name. So on my resume, yes, everyone tends to think that someone must have made a mistake, and Latia, however it may be pronounced, has to be the last name, and Gary is the first name.
That's so random.
It
My
happens
gosh.
all the time. It happens all the time. I get a lot of emails that say, "Hey, Gary." I, yes, I do. Or once I set up a meeting with myself, and this at this time I was a principal engineer. The next level was a manager. So I set up a meeting with myself, my counterpart in a particular engineering department, and their manager, and a few other people. I set up the meeting.
Hmm.
And so I go into the meeting and I get ready to start the meeting. And the manager says, "Wait, hold up, you got to wait for Gary." I said,
Oh my
I'm here.
God.
I'm here because he had never met me in person. We had
Hmm.
only communicated through emails. So he's expecting to see a male version of myself.
Oh my God.
So all this time he thought I was a guy. So yes, his face, you can imagine, was caught off guard. Um, and so I will say that initially, as a Black woman, as someone that thinks be to God, I don't necessarily look my age. Um, I, on the initial impression, I'm questioned on kind of what could she know, or challenged, right? Even
Right.
before I actually speak, it's not the expectation of me and what a male counterpart or what you may expect isn't there. But
Interesting.
so therefore, I'm used to proving myself. And I
Hmm.
have absolutely no problem proving myself, right? I have no problem proving my knowledge. I have no problem proving my resiliency, right? Because I'm not going to know everything, but I can figure it out, right? And I have no problem speaking up when necessary. I'm not a big time talker, but I've learned to use my voice in the most efficient way. So naturally, my voice is soft and quiet. And so I had to learn that when I'm in meetings, especially it would be early morning meetings, 6 a.m. meetings in manufacturing production, and I'm half asleep. We're talking about the plan of the day, or something comes up, and I kind of mumbled an idea, or I kind of just say something as far as what can help. And say the plant manager doesn't actually hear me, but the guy sitting next to me, my counterpart, hears me. And so he says my idea. This is real life. He says my idea. Well, that doesn't have to happen too many times for me to learn how to communicate better. So in that particular time, in my early 20s, I then learned to go directly to my plant manager and share my ideas. Because one, I was still half asleep at that time in the morning. I have ideas, but I'm not loud enough at this point in the day so that he knows it's coming to me. It was coming from me. So therefore, I learned just to stop by and swing by his office afterwards and say, hey, in today's meeting, we talked about this. Well, this is my idea. And I can run it down for him. Because guess what? Nobody can explain my ideas better than I do. You can repeat what I said, but you can't elaborate on it. Right. So therefore, I learned how to communicate best with him because he just didn't hear me. And that's understandable. And in today's time, I've learned how to speak louder when needed. And I've learned how to deepen my voice so that everybody in this room hears me and knows where this information is coming from. And still do it being Tia. Still do it with my personality and still do it in a way that everyone at the table understands, right? So that for myself, right, we have to learn how to interact, how best to communicate for you to get across to others. So for me, that meant sometimes deepening my voice. That meant sometimes speaking slowly so that I can look everyone in their eye so that we have an understanding, we have a connection of what I'm saying. Because typically what I'm saying is very critical to the progress of this project and terms of that, right? And so therefore I have to make sure I'm using the correct words and you understand what I'm saying and why. Sometimes I have to explain why I'm saying it because we have particular skill sets and I'm operating within my skill set, which is my strength and my knowledge base. Everyone in the room doesn't have the same strength, right? And so as a team, we have to be able to communicate with each other and understand the value that we bring. And I say as a woman, to be quite honest, the name thing is kind of a blessing, but I've received offers for roles totally based on my resume, right? So that's my experience. So when I started a business, when I go in to see a new client, before I go in to see them, they've already looked me up on LinkedIn. I get those notices on LinkedIn that's, who's looked at your page or whatever. So I already know, I was like, oh, because they're trying to figure out who is she? What does she know? What's her experience before I get it? And so having your experience, being able to speak to your experience, you have to be able to say what you've done and what value you've added, because that carries through. That's going to show on your resume. It's going to show in your communication. It's going to show on those that can speak on your behalf. And I would say, as a woman, I think I don't change who I am. I smile a lot. I smile a lot at work. I smile a lot and then sometimes it kind of works to my benefit because I can tell a vendor, you're not performing and I need you to change. And I can get it across in a way that they realize I mean what I say. And they also know, especially if I've been working with them, that when I'm no longer smiling, we definitely have a problem and we got to fix it.
Gotcha.
So did that answer your question?
Oh, that absolutely. Yes. I'm just trying to think like, where do I add to that? Because she covered literally everything from like finding champions all the way to, understanding who you are and being confident in yourself. And I think I really like that you brought up. So this is not something that I've ever like heard from anyone else before about how you recognize the need to like change the way that you spoke and being more assertive physically, just I guess, because talking is sort of like a physical thing. But deepening your voice and being louder, and sometimes I feel like a lot of times we're told, be more confident in yourself, but what are some like specific ways to actually demonstrate confidence? So like posture, speaking louder, speaking more slowly, and methodically and allowing yourself the time to think through your ideas before you just start talking. Um, and I appreciate that you brought that up because I feel like that's sort of where the idea of being a self at you're advocating for yourself, building your self confidence, and your attempt to get there never really you can never make it from one side to the other because there isn't that understanding of how do you actually do that. What are some specific action items you can take to get to that place where you are more confident in yourself and you are more adept at advocating for yourself. So, just to sort of recap some of the things that you said, speaking loudly, speaking more methodically, and really thinking through what you're saying, just making your presence known, making eye contact with people, just like I like sort of the way that you mentioned, when you're not smiling, like people understand, like now you mean business. So recognizing those different facial cues and how you can leverage them to give off an impression um, that I might convince people to pay more attention to you. Um, and just also the fact that you sort of recognize that you're tired in the morning, and so knowing like how you can navigate that challenge, I would guess challenge, or just like navigate that situation in a way that still allows your voice to be heard, by taking sort of a different approach, by talking to your manager after the meeting when you really had the situation back under your own control. So I was just
Can I
trying to
just
like
say
think over
that's a good point that you just brought up when it's in your control, right?
Mhm.
When it's best fitting for you. That is also something key in being able to exert or show self-confidence is when
Mhm.
you had the moment to where you're at your best, right? So I'm not at my best at 6 a.m. after I just drove an hour to get to the manufacturing facility. But by 8 o'clock, I may be. And 8 o'clock, he that might be the time where he's in his office and just kind of relaxing or calming down after starting the day. And then I can
Mhm.
go on and say, hey, again, I'm my personality, right? Hey, remember you brought up this, that, and the other? How about, and then again, like I said, nobody can speak to my ideas better than me. Nobody else can
Mhm.
speak to my thoughts better than me. And that goes for everyone else, whether male or woman, right? No one can explain your thoughts and your ideas better than you. They may be able to elaborate on them, but they didn't start it, right?
Right.
And only you could take it to the next level. So own that within
Mhm.
yourself.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect way to conclude because that's something that I feel like everybody should keep in mind. Again, recognizing your own value, recognizing what you bring, and not being afraid to share that, and in any way that you can, and in a way um that allows you to explore your fullest potential.
Awesome. Yeah, great, Ainsley.
Do you have any last pieces of advice about advocating for yourself, about building confidence, things that you really want people to take away from this conversation?
I would say the first step to building up yourself is taking the time to consider and think inwardly towards you and what you want to um, perse- uh, show others, right? How you want to show up. So that because we all have adjustments to make. Like I stated, one of my adjustments is how I communicate. And I can tell you right now that after we get off this Zoom call, I'm going to be done speaking for a while because that's just because that's just not my natural zone. But I know how to work in it when I have to, and then get out of it, right?
Mhm.
And so you take a moment to get to know yourself. Take the time to develop those skills, where those opportunities where you see that you need to perform differently. And the
Mhm.
one thing that I always tell students is learn how to communicate with others to get what you need.
Mhm.
You can adjust your communication style to the person's ears, so that they will want to pour into you, that they will want to give you the information that may be not in textbooks, but through work experience that they have. So when you're
Mhm.
in different shadowing interns or co-op opportunities, learn how to draw that knowledge from those that have the experience in the field, because that's only going to make you a better person, right? And the number one thing is always add value. Always add value to whatever scenarios you are involved in.
Really like that. Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much for your time tonight. This has been amazing. And I have just acquired so many tactics that I know I'm going to be using in the next 4 years of my life through college and beyond. So thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate your time.
You are welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to speak and share. So thank you, Ainsley.
Thank you.